Hello everyone, my name is Jason, aka BaconChest. Welcome to CPC Majors Week 1 Power Rankings. I'm here with my co-host, Jmac. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jmac. This is my first time being in the CPC. I'm currently a coach in the D League.
Awesome. So we're going to be going over the Majors teams and going through our rankings for them. Let's make a start. So moving into the first team, so at number 16, so this was my number 15 and your number 16, we have the Jersey Pursuit, coached by KHD. Jersey, the Jersey Pursuit, they had a loss in week 1. A tight loss in the end, but I think was realistically a loss that felt pretty comfortable throughout. What did you think about KHD's performance?
I think his prep was extremely lacking. The opponent he faced had Mega Venusaur, and I don't believe he brought anything to actually break Mega Venusaur. So that was his ultimate pitfall, was that Mega Venusaur just walled his entire team and he could do nothing about it. So I think that's why I ranked him so low, is because he lacked in prep and didn't keep around his answers to Mega Venusaur for the late game.
That's pretty much what I had in my notes, is that I was like, why did you not bring Latios when it's obviously quite a good Mega Venusaur response, and that's not something your team had a lot of? And then, if not Latios, you had the Mandibuzz there, why was there no Brave Bird on the Mandibuzz? So, yeah, I mean, that was my main piece of feedback. I actually felt like KHD outplayed for much of this game. Like, I felt like he was playing really well overall. Like, he played really well with B, and, was sort of able to whittle away and get rid of a bunch of the other threats on the opponent's side. But the Mega Venusaur was always there to just come in and wall literally everything. And obviously that was a huge problem and ended up costing him the game. So, yeah, there wasn't a lot to say here. It was just kind of like, if you are going to play this team that is kind of heavy, particularly the squad that he chose to bring, was kind of heavy on frailer offense. So there was a Zangoose, there was the Lycanroc Dusk, and obviously the Mega Beedrill. And if you're going to play a squad like that, then you absolutely need to make sure that there's nothing that walls you, because those mons aren't going to stick around over the course of a longer game. And so, I felt like it was pretty obvious looking at his opponent's team what the big walls were. Make sure that you have ways of defeating them. I don't know. Just seems like a bizarre thing to miss out on in prep.
Yeah, he did bring Celesteela, Mandibuzz, and Hariyama, but the opponent had a Kyurem Black, and as you can see from the team here, there's not much that can do anything to a Kyurem Black. Maybe Rotom Heat, but even with Terravolt and Earth Power will just take it out completely. There's not really any single Pokemon on his team that can take Kyurem Black 1v1, so it would just be pivoting around to sack something and then bring in, let's say, a Scarf Latios to hopefully try and Draco Meteor or do some form of damage to the Kyurem.
Yeah, definitely agree. I think they could have run something like a Berry Azu or a Berry Celesteela to deal with Kyurem, but aside from that, there's really not that much on this team to deal with Kyurem Black. But I mean, that said, I think in that case he did go about it in mostly the right way, bringing those kind of frailer, faster threats that can actually put offensive pressure on Kyurem Black. So obviously the Lycanroc Dusk can really put the pressure on. The other bit of prep that was just kind of funny was the Belly Drum Zangoose. It's not the only Belly Drum set we're going to talk about this week. Didn't come off at all. And I'm not sure that Zangoose is necessarily a mon that's going to be able to set up on many teams. And I don't think the team he was up against was passive enough to really justify bringing a Belly Drum set.
The opponent did bring Smeargle, so if you brought it in turn 1 and clicked belly drum against the Smeargle, like I could see that. But it was late game.
Yeah.
I think the opponent only had Mega Venusaur left, and he decided to click belly drum after seeing Giga Drain do 29%. So like he essentially just sacked off Zangoose when Zangoose could have got important chip damage. So I think it was just a misplay in the late game.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I thought overall he played the early and mid game quite well. He just didn't have an answer for Mega Venusaur, and that hurt him in the end. So yeah, kind of hard to rate this performance. Obviously, like I rated it reasonably low, but like I did feel like there was some potential there. He just needs to maybe clean up the prep a little bit. So yeah, that's about it in terms of the Jersey Pursuit. So let's move on to the next team. So at 15th, so this is my number 16 and your number 15, we have Inter Melantic FC, coached by Burigo, who went 0-1 and with a -3 differential. What did you think of Burigo's performance this week?
I thought Burigo played very well. The -3 differential kind of is definitely not something that can speak volumes about the match. Burigo was in a position to win 4-0 with Mega Gallade at +2, but ended up getting static parried from Zapdos, which ended up costing him the game. So I think the prep was there from Burigo. Definitely outplayed his opponent to get in the position to set up with Mega Gallade. I think it was just unfortunate that the hacks played a factor in the 3-0 loss.
Yeah, that's reasonable. I did make a couple of notes on this. I'm probably being a little bit harsh on Burigo here, but yes, the static sucked, but he could have avoided it by using a rock move. Like, Rock Slide would 2-hit KO in that situation, Stone Edge would OHKO in that situation. Mega Gallade gets access to both those moves. So I questioned a little bit the prep there. If you know that Zapdos is going to be the response to Mega Gallade, making sure that you don't have to risk the static twice, because, you know, that's obviously, that becomes quite a big risk once you're doing it twice. And so, yeah, that was not great. But, you know, obviously, like, theoretically, that should have worked. Like, the odds were, you know, somewhat in his favor to get through that. I did really like the aggressive plays with Hydreigon, like the Z Fire Blast on the Bulu switch in was really clean, so that was good play there. I thought the Raikou set was a real problem on this team. The lack of either having Calm Mind or having Toxic was a real problem when I think Raikou could have actually put in a lot of work this game, but in the end it just couldn't really do enough damage to a defensive or bulkier Zapdos. And so he was kind of just able to roost spam for a little while. And the game got kind of stuck in a bit of a loop for a little bit, which I think in the end hurt Burigo much more than it hurt his opponent. Yeah, I think...
Right.
Sorry, yeah, you go.
You go ahead. No, you were continuing your train of thought. You go.
Yeah. Yeah, I think overall, my main issue with this, and probably the reason why I have it number 16 rather than number 15, even though obviously, yeah, he was in a better position to win this game than KHD was in his game, is that I still think this squad is very weak and very linear. I know he has made some transactions for week 2, so I'll be interested to see how they change the makeup of the team. But I do think that if you're going to have such a limited squad, maybe you need to, A, take advantage of the options you do have. I think like Z Talonflame actually looked pretty good in this matchup. And also really know what you need to preserve for the late game. So, like, the end game of this was that Crawdaunt was able to pick up a Swords Dance Aqua Jet sweep. Like, the one Crawdaunt switch in on this, pretty much this entire roster, is the Hydreigon, because Vaporeon, given it was a Spadef Vaporeon, wasn't going to take a +2 knockoff. and probably was going to get outsped if it's an offensive Crawdont. And so, yeah, I think that throwing away the Hydreigon into the Nidoking in the mid game and taking, I think he took like 60 or 70% from a Sludge Wave on the Nidoking was a real problem, especially when, if the Vaporeon is Spadef and it was there for the Blacephalon, which didn't actually come, I don't really see why he didn't throw that in against the Nidoking, because it wasn't really doing that much against the rest of his opponent's team at that point. So, yeah, I think whilst, yeah, there was a bit of luck coming into this game, there was also a bit of prep and a bit of, like, team limitations coming into play. And I think that's probably, like, overall why I think that, like, Burigo's, like, sort of upper limit in terms of how much this team can compete with the other squads is not that great right now. Maybe with the transactions, it will help out a bit, but yeah, we'll see how he goes in future.
Right. Like, I think the prep too, like having Ice Punch covered Nidoking, it covered Tapu Bulu, it covered the Zapdos. Like, even looking at the other Pokemon on Henry's roster, like, you probably would have Drain Punch for the Crawdont and the Skarm, and you might have knockoff for like Uxie or Blacephalon. Like, so like, it's definitely a 4 move slot syndrome type of deal. So you can't run Rock Slide and Drain Punch and Zen Headbutt and have those stab options available, or the super effective options that can't cover everything. So I think the 4 move slot syndrome definitely played a factor this week with Mega Gallade.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, yeah, I guess, like, you know, he made a reasonable choice being like, Ice Punch gives me overall better coverage, even though it increases the risk that my sweep is going to get stopped. I think sometimes, yeah, you do have to kind of make that trade-off where you think about how much is my sweep being guaranteed versus what do I need to get rid of to enable it. And sometimes it might be better to say, okay, I need to make sure this one is dead before I go for the sweep. And sometimes it might be better to say, I can go for the sweep whenever, it's just that there is going to be a risk that my opponent is able to stop that in some way.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's obviously that's a tough trade-off to make. Yeah, obviously, yeah, was a little bit unlucky in the end, but I do think also made a couple of misplays around, just in terms of prep and also in terms of play, that cost him the ability to come back from that Mega Gallade sweep being stopped. So, that said, let's move on to our next team. So it's me. It's the St Kilda Superiors, coached by me, BaconChest. And we both had me at number 14, which I think is pretty reasonable. Maybe you can start us off talking about my trash team and how poorly I did.
I don't even think you did that poorly. I actually wanted to put you higher in the rankings, but yeah, no, I think you got haxed kind of early. When Volume brought in Clefable and you missed your Seed Flare, that would have guaranteed the kill on Clefable. I think that really set you back, and it gave Volume another option to potentially have another sack in the later game. It gave him the ability to Wish Pass if need be, which I think did happen, if I'm remembering correctly. But I think you didn't play terribly. I don't know if Machamp brought priority this week, but if it did, like, I think you should have clicked the priority moves more often. I think it was an overall good game by you. I think Volume played terribly. Definitely in the late game, like trying to set up late, it gave you the option to come back a little bit and lower the differential. But I think definitely if Volume played better and the hacks continued to go his way, I believe, yeah, you would have lost more than 4-0. I think it would have been like a 5-0 or a 6-0 game at that point.
Yeah, there were a few things in this game. I think the main thing in terms of prep is that I shouldn't have brought Arcanine, really. It was a very optimistic bring against a team that has a Sand Core. My main thing with it was that I thought, well, it has a really good matchup against, because it was a choice banded Arcanine. It had a really good matchup against Clefable and Amoonguss. And obviously, Amoonguss did end up playing a big role in the game. But I do think that there was the potential to maybe bring something like the Drapion and try and just knock off the Amoonguss's leftovers to, like, make it a little bit easier to whittle down. And that would have given me a better matchup against some of the other mons on the team. Or potentially even bring the Reuniclus, just so I had another really, really bulky threat that also threatens out the Amoonguss. So yeah, I think there were a couple of issues. Even actually, what would have been really nice would have been like a Flame Orb Magic Guard Reuniclus, so that I never had to worry about Spore. That would have actually been quite good now that I think about it. But yeah, I think in terms of play, I did all right against the Sandcore. Like I was able to play around those two pretty well. Was able to use Shaman pretty effectively there. But yeah, the Seed Flare misses, I think there were two. There was one in the earlier game on the Clef, and then there was one obviously in the late game on the Feraligatr that let him that stopped me from stopping that thing from sweeping. In the end, it didn't end up sweeping because in the very last turn of the game, Volume tried to throw the entire game away by switching out on Zygarde, when I could have set up and with Groundium Z killed the Amoonguss, and then the rest of the team was going to die to a +1/+1 Zygarde. So yeah, it was a weird game. It was a very weird game where I felt like I was kind of getting haxed a little bit throughout. Nothing huge, but it was kind of setting me back. Like things like also the Roar on Empoleon, bringing in the Lati, when that was the only mon that he had that matched up well against Empoleon at that point of the game. And it enabled him to heal up with that Lati and bring that thing back, for example, out of a neutral E-speed range. So yeah, there were a couple of things that hurt. Nothing that I can complain about too much. But yeah, it was just kind of strange to play this game where I felt like I got outplayed for most of the game, particularly with the Amoonguss. I should have just been more focused on, like, ignoring that thing's offensive presence and just kind of making predictions. So, like, there's a point in the game where he has the Amoonguss in on Mega Diancie, and I click Earth Power once, and he stays in, and then I click Psychic the next turn as he switches into Tyranitar, and that just hurt me so bad. If I just clicked Earth Power there, then I can kill him with Moonblast, and Tyranitar is gone, and that means he has to try and sweep with the Excadrill at that point, rather than potentially being able to bring it in later. So yeah, there were a few things that kind of hurt in that respect. But yeah, it was weird to have a game where I felt like I got out-prepped and to some extent outplayed, and then also out-haxed, and then to still come down to the last turn, and if I'd gone for the win instead of going for differential, then I would have actually just won the game right there. So, I don't know. It was a strange matchup.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry that Shaman let you down. I've used it once in League before, in the draft format, and I went 3 for 8 with Seed Flares. So, I understand. The Seed Flare misses, like, it's a curse, I swear.
Yeah, I mean, in this game, it was also the PP was a huge issue. As soon as I missed that first one on the Clef, I was like, oh no, I'm going to run out of Seed Flares, because he can always, like, if he predicts and switches into Amoonguss, that's one of the 8, and he has Protect, so that's also another one, at least, that I'm going to have to sacrifice. So yeah, there was a bit of a problem in that respect, but yeah. So yeah, overall, I don't think there's a huge amount to say. I still think my team is alright, and I think I should be able to bounce back, but it was a tough matchup against what I think is probably one of the stronger squads. And yeah, we'll see if I can maybe do a bit better if I have to go up against him again.
Yeah, let's move on here. Next up, we have the Rhine Valley Guardians, coached by Risepool. I had them at 13. Bacon had them at 12. All I have to say about this matchup is stop Johning your opponent and hurry up and play. They didn't play their game this week, so unfortunately we didn't have the opportunity to watch their match and rank it. So that's why I moved it down one, just because of them stalling our job in ranking the drafts here.
I like it. I like it. I was wondering why you'd moved both Rise and his opponent down one. But I like that explanation. I decided to keep them at the same level, try to not be vindictive for them not playing. But the one comment I will make about these teams is that they both have Azelf in the logo, is something I just noticed. I've never actually looked closely at Rise's logo before. But so, yeah, it's him versus the Oakland Azelfs. So we'll see whether one Guardian can beat three Guardians. I guess probably the advantage there is with Rise Pool, but we'll see how it goes.
I mean, Psych does have Azelf on his team, so at least he has a mascot pick. I don't see any of the Lake Trio here on Rise Pool's team. So,
that is a good point. There's some good team logo synergy with Psych's team. So we'll see. Although I think he's traded out Azelf for week 2. So
he has. Yeah.
He's gotten rid of Azelf. Yeah, gotten rid of the mascot. So I don't know about that at all. I don't know about that. All right,
still has it for week 1. It counts.
Yeah. So let's move on to the next team. So this is the Kentucky Fried Dragons, coached by. Oh, hang on, I've gone one slide too forward. Spoilers. Sorry. But yeah, we have the Kentucky Fried Dragons, coached by Muse the Best, who took a loss this week. I was quite disappointed in this because I think this team is really cool. I really like it overall, but I think there were a couple of mistakes in prep and a few things that went against him in play. So in terms of the prep, I felt that Licky Licky was maybe not the best choice to bring against what was a very, very offensive team, with the Tapu Lele and with like a bunch of other things, and the Gengar, for example. So like obviously it does provide like immunity to the Ghost Stab from Gengar, but I just felt like there was a lot of momentum and a lot of offensive pressure being exerted to the point where the Wish Passing set wasn't necessarily going to be able to do its job and keep other things alive throughout the game. I felt like maybe there could have been like some more offensive pressure being applied back against his opponent, that might have helped out. Particularly, I feel like I was surprised not to see Thunderous T in this matchup. In that not only would it have provided an electric immunity, which something I didn't notice when I was initially analyzing this draft is that there's no ground type here. So if you're going to stop people from volt switching around on you, you need to be bringing Thunderous T for that electric immunity, and he didn't, which I thought was a bit questionable. And I also think that Thunderous T with a Charlie Berry is probably the only thing on this team that stops Hawlucha from sweeping. Given that he didn't bring a particularly defensive Necrozma, like, judging by the fact that it gets 2-hit carried in the end game, I assume a defensive Necrozma would not be 2-hit carried by neutral acrobatics from a Hawlucha, because it's not that strong. So, yeah, if you're not going to bring a defensive set on the 1-1 that takes neutral damage, maybe bring the thing that can actually resist both its stabs, and then you can bring a berry for the one coverage move that Hawlucha can bring against you. Or at least the one that it's most likely to bring against you. And yeah, so that seemed a little strange to me. The other thing in prep was that I don't feel like there was a good plan in place to try and set up for the Hitmonlee sweep. So, like, I feel like he went for hit the Hitmonlee button with the terrain really early, which didn't make a lot of sense given that the Hawlucha was still in the back, so like his opponent could always bring in Lele, then bring in Lucha at the absolute worst case. But then also the Gliscor was still there, and Hitmonlee just cannot break Gliscor at all. So yeah, I felt like there were a couple of errors in prep, and then in play he wasn't able to bring the full force of what the mons he had brought to bear on his opponent in order to actually pressure it properly. There was a little bit of luck in the late game with Curse Body on the Mega Sizzle's Bullet Punch, which stopped it from dealing with the Gengar. I don't think that really made a huge difference because obviously once it deals with the Gengar, the Lele can still come in after, and that was always going to put a stop to Mega Sizzle, and that was always going to lead to the Hawlucha coming in and sweeping in the late game. So, yeah, I don't know. I really liked this team on first look. I'm maybe liking it a little bit less now. What did you think of this matchup?
I definitely think that Muse the Best definitely misplayed early with Hitmonlee. Not having anything to really break the Gliscor was definitely interesting. I believe the Gliscor lived for the majority of the match, even taking I think 2 or 3 surfs from the Tapu Fini. If the Tapu had maybe Ice Beam, that would have covered Hawlucha and Gliscor a little better. Definitely not bringing Thundurus T was interesting. Because of the Electros on the opponent's team that was freely able to Volt Switch around and really kind of counter everything that Mew the Best could really do. I think the Licky Licky was definitely not the best prep either. I do like the Ghost immunity, but when your opponent has like a Lele plus a Hawlucha, I don't think Licky Licky has the best defense to live a +2 high jump kick or even a neutral high jump kick. Yeah, no, I think with the overall prep, like even Bullet Punch on Scizor, when your opponent has Psychic Surge, it kind of neutralizes your priority ability to kind of get yourself back in the game. So even if for some reason that the Scizor wasn't curse bodied by the Gengar, it was just an easy switch into the Lele, and then back into something like Gliscor or Electros to take the U-turn. Yeah, I think it was just overall just poor play from Use the Best and maybe a little bit of weak prep this week.
Yeah, I think he was in a tough spot with the Lele to some extent because Mega Scizor, being a Mega, can't do something like run a Choice Scarf to try and do like Choice Scarf Iron Head to get past the Lele. So yeah, it's a really tough spot when you've got him on that you need because it's one of your few psychic resists, but it can't actually do anything to a Lele. Like Lele's guaranteed to outspeed, it's guaranteed to be able to kill you with HP Fire. Like, I mean, I guess like a fully spit F set. He may have actually taken a HP Fire in the game and not died, but like, you know, there was not necessarily the ability to consistently switch in or consistently threaten out that Mon as the game wore on. So yeah, it was a real problem in the matchup. But I'm not necessarily sure he did enough to kind of mitigate that. And yeah, as I said, I think Thundurus T was just such an obvious bring here, and I don't know why it didn't come. But that said, let's move on to our next coach, which you will have already seen a preview of, potentially, because I accidentally hit next slide. So this is the Blackmont Raikougas, coached by Zamcro, aka Scoot. And Zamcro had a really bad loss this week, as reflected by the fact that I sent him tumbling down the rankings from number 3 all the way down to number 11. He did admittedly lose to a team that, let's just say, is quite high up in the rankings, in Owen and the Leinster Latias. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about this game because it was a bit weird. I think that Scoot brought a very interesting team that was full of some things that were really good and some things that were a bit questionable. Obviously, the Belly Drum Zardex did get the kill on the Snorlax, and that was really cool. I wasn't a super big fan of it just in terms of its ability to actually win the game, but I guess if you were trying to break down the Snorlax to win the game with something else, then that's pretty good. And, you know, it was definitely entertaining to watch a Snorlax just, like, drop to a Zardex. But aside from that, I thought the rest of the team didn't, like, synergize all that well and didn't put a lot of pressure onto Owen's team, particularly the Superior. Obviously, it was somewhat necessary to take on the Aloma Mola, but I think that's maybe a reflection on a weakness of the team where Superior is not always going to have good matchups because it is so limited in its coverage. And Electrode is just such an underwhelming electric type that, yeah, bulky waters may be an issue for this team moving forward because, yeah, Superior was, I think, a drag on the matchup, but it was also entirely necessary because it was the only thing that took on Aloma Mola. So, yeah, that may be something that Scoot has to try and rectify in future.
Yeah, like watching the game back, Scoot definitely set up too early with the Zardax, in my opinion, since the Crobat was still alive
Mm-hmm,
and there
mm-hmm.
was still the Sucker Punch potential from the Mega Mawile. Um, so definitely leaving it vulnerable to taking a big hit and weakening its ability to sweep through the rest of Ian's team.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that the SERP was definitely needed to come, but
Mm.
having Pokemon like Venomoth and Crobat and Victini and Mega Mawile, like that definitely limits what Serperior can do overall with Contrary Leaf Storm. I think even bringing Sylveon was a poor choice, given that there's Venomoth, Crobat, and Mega Mawile that can all do massive damage to it. It was definitely interesting what Scoot brought. I think the prep was definitely very very poor given the opponent.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's reasonable. And oh, I was going to say something, but now I've forgotten. Oh, yeah, and I mean, you talk about the things that were there that could outspeed or out prioritize the Megazard, and it's the Mega Mile Sucker Punch, and it's the Crobat with Brave Bird. Neither of those are going to kill a Zard X if it's at full or close to full, and so that's where I do question a little bit bringing Belly Drum over something like Swords Dance, because obviously Swords Dance isn't cutting away half your health and putting you in range of those faster moves. And so I do think that Swords Dance may have been the way, and just to try and maybe whittle the Snorlax a bit, and then after a Swords Dance, yeah, I think Zardex put in a lot of work because there wasn't a lot on Owen's team that could actually just revenge kill it. Um, and so I think that, yeah, maybe a Swords Dance set, whilst it would have been less heat and it would have been less fun to watch, may have actually proven more effective in the matchup.
Well, yeah, but Ian brought the heat, so really, like, it was fun to watch regardless. We'll get more into that later when we're talking about Ian's setup in the game that allowed him to win 5-0.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. All right, so let's move on to our next coach. And oh, okay, yeah. So this is Psychedelic Scizor and the Oakland Azelfs. I have them at number 7. JMac has them at number 8. There's nothing to say here because we've already talked about this a bit in terms of the Rhine Valley Guardians. Their match is not getting played until I think Sunday, and it's currently Friday. So yeah, we needed to get this recorded now. So yep, nothing to really say here. I really like this team. This is like one of my favorite teams on the whole, out of the whole set, just because it's got a lot of cool mons like Rabombi and Mega Altaria and Infernape. But we'll see how it goes. And come back next week to hear our thoughts on how these two teams have gone. So, moving on to our next team. This is the Toronto Tyranitar's, and this is so we're in a set of a few teams right now where they're combined. If you combine the two rankings, it came out as 15. This team gets above the previous team because I ranked them at number 6, which was a higher ranking than either of us gave to the Oakland A's Elves. But yeah, I ranked them at number 6. You had them at number 9. And this is, yeah, the Toronto Tyranitar's coached by Blitz, who did pick up a win this week. But how about you take us away on this team?
Yeah, so I marked Blitz down a little bit because I believe Blitz got insanely lucky in this game.
Yep.
Will should have won 6-0. I believe it was 6-0. Like
Mm-hmm.
he had Comfey set up to +3 and was in a position to just entirely sweep the rest of the game. and I forget what happened, whether it was like a poison from muck or I honestly
it
forget
was
what.
it was a freeze from Ice Punch on Conkeldurr, that Blitz was able to get on the
Yeah,
Comfey.
like
Yeah.
just to get the freeze, like 10%. He's running Iron Fist instead of Sheer Force. Just to get that small chance to stop your opponent in its tracks is just terrible. Like Will had so many options to just win from that point, and like I don't know. I think Blitz just played really poorly.
Yeah, so I think I was a little less harsh on this team, mostly because I think Blitz really actually only made one mistake, and that one mistake was not accounting for an absolute max defensive Comfey with his Katana set. Because, at the point, like from Blitz's point of view, I totally understand. He brought the Katana in on the Comfey. It had gone for Calm Mind, and he went for the Smart Strike, expecting that to kill because it's a Katana and it's a Comfey. And it only did like 90% because it was, yeah, absolute max defensive Comfey. And look, that's poor prep to not account for that set. But I totally understand. I think that's something that all of us have done at some point, is just be like, oh yeah, it's super effective. It's going to kill. It's super effective stab from a like very powerful mod. It's going to kill. And not seeing that really hurt him. And then, yeah, he then got bailed out by hacks at the end of the game. I do think there were a couple of other things that he did make mistakes with. Probably a bit reductive to say he only made the one mistake because he made a couple of mistakes around the Comfey. The main thing was that he stayed in on the Comfey with Suicune after already knowing it had Calm Mind and knowing that his Suicune didn't have anything to deal with the Comfey. I just don't understand that play at all. And then he like switched around on the Comfey a bunch, and he spent 3 or 4 turns not knowing what he was doing. After I think he just got massively tilted by the fact that Smart Strike didn't kill the Comfey, and he like switched around, took damage on his Muck, but then was like, no, I'll switch out the Muck and go back into Suicune, I think, or go back into Katana, even though he knew Katana was going to die to the priority draining kiss at that point because it had already taken 37 or 38% from the previous one. And yeah, I think that like he played about 70% of the game really well, and there was just that little bit in the middle with Comfey where he just got massively tilted and threw half his team away when he didn't need to because Alolan Muck, I think the Comfey was only at +1. Alolan Muck was only taking 25%-ish from the draining kiss, so he could have just gone into that, click Poison Jab, and like the Comfey was never going to be able to recover enough, eventually going to get the poison. There you go. I don't know why he then decided to switch around so much and sack so much health and sack a bunch of mons to the Comfey and then get bailed out by Conkeldurr. It was a very strange portion of the game to watch.
Yeah, like even I think the Comfey even clicks Synthesis within this mix of moves, allowing it to live longer than it should have as well. So it was just kind of funny to watch Blitz kind of struggle against Will.
Yeah.
I think that's why I put Will higher than Blitz in the rankings, but definitely getting bailed out by hacks early.
Yeah. Bailed out by hacks. I think he had a couple of errors, or not errors, but a couple of things that were exposed about this team, like the fact that there's not a particularly amazing hazard game on this team. Like you've just got the Donphan and the Steelix. Was I think somewhat exposed by Will's team, where the Fire Silvally was able to consistently come in on the Katana throughout the game, and that was something that really hurt Blitz and his ability to sweep through. I mean, he eventually did sweep through with the Katana after getting that luck with the Conkeldurr, but I do think that maybe having a faster or more, like a different rocker that's not weak to water, for example, would have given him the chance to get rocks up early. And with rocks up, stuff like the Comfey it's not going to be able to switch in as effectively to hits and things like the Silvally Fire. That's no longer a defensive check to Kartana because it was taking about 20% or something from a Smart Strike or a Leaf Blade. And, if that's taking 25% from Rocks and then 20% from Smart Strike or Leaf Blade, it's switching in twice for the entire game and then it's gone. So, yeah, I think that there were a couple of limitations exposed, and I also think that, yeah, the Suicune should have had some way of dealing with setup, given that it seemed to be his main switch in to any potential setup mon. I feel like if you're going to do that, you should probably be running Raw, for example, on your Suicune to deal with setup mons. So yeah, I think there were a couple of ways that Blitz could have very easily dealt with the problems he experienced with Will's team that just weren't there. And yeah, I was definitely tempted to put him below Will despite him getting the win, just because, yeah, it was a bit haxy. In the end, I thought, this team is overall quite strong. I did actually really, really like one play that I did love from Blitz was scouting, picking the Gaugeist, having the Frisk to scout what Z move was on the Scolipede. Was really good because, yeah, that Scolipede was a big threat depending on what Z move it had. And Blitz was able to scout that really effectively, be like assured that Gaugeist was going to be able to take the hit because it was the Fightinium Z, not like a Buggium Z. And that was able to like stop that thing in its tracks in the early game. So that was really good. But yeah, overall, not the most convincing win, you could say.
Yeah. Up next, we do have Evan, coach of the Brighton Bewares. I had him at 5, didn't change him at all, and Bacon moved him down by 5. So why don't you explain why you ranked him so low?
Yeah. So I've maybe been a bit harsh on Evan here. He did lose to Styx, who's obviously the defending champion, very high quality player, and it was a reasonably good game. My only thing was that I did feel like Styx was able to play in a way that was fairly safe for most of the game. He didn't really have to take too many risks, and whilst he played the end game very strangely, in a way that, like, similarly to my game versus Volume, or like could have potentially thrown at points, but he played in a way that in the end guaranteed him the win, and maybe lost him a couple of points of differential. It ended up only being a 2-0 when it really looked like it was going to be like a 4-0 at one point. But yeah, whilst I still think Evan's team is really strong, having so many good physical breakers like the Mega Kang, Tarak, Metagross, Mamoswine, is really good. I do think there was a bit of limitations in terms of the prep and limitations in terms of the play that were exposed here. So, for example, and like I think Evan acknowledged this in the chat during the game, was that he threw all his eggs into the Swampert basket rather than the Nidoqueen basket in terms of his prep. And when Styx bought the Nidoqueen, that really threw him off and he wasn't able to pressure that thing particularly effectively, which is a huge problem because Nidoqueen is something that can actually be fairly underwhelming if you're able to just offensively pressure it with all your mons. But if you aren't, it's going to get off several big hits, and every hit is going to really hurt, particularly against a team like this that didn't have the best sustainability, because I don't... Did the Umbreon come? I don't think the Umbreon came.
Looking at it, no, he did not.
Yeah, I didn't think the Umbreon came. And whilst there was Wish on the Mega Kangaskhan, I don't know about this, because I feel if you're going to have Wish on the Mega Kangaskhan, it probably needs to not be taking super powerful hits really early on. And, I think by the time it got off a Wish, it was already down to 50. And so, I feel like maybe he needed to maybe bring something like a defensive Metagross to be the kind of initial switch into the Koko, and then potentially use the Mega Kang as a kind of check to the Koko later on. Might have been a better way to go about that, and then you can potentially Wish and then go into the something like a Metagross or something like a Seismitoad to keep those things alive going into the late game. Yeah, I'm not sure. It's a hard team to prep against, and I do feel like it was a tough matchup for this team. In that Evan has quite an offensive team, but his main ways of speed control are things like the Whimsicott and the Thunderous, and like obviously Thunderous's pranks the T-Wave, not particularly useful against a team with Tapu Koko and stuff like a Alolan Raichu. So yeah, it was a tough matchup. We'll see if the kind of limitations that exposed were specific to this game, or whether they're things that are going to hurt Evan in the long run. What did you think?
I don't think Evan played poorly at all.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think that the support Mega Kang was interesting. Um, I don't think it was kind of a good option to bring versus Styx. Styx does have the Cofagrigus that could wall the Kang, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think Styx just has an excellent team. He's an excellent battler. He thinks things through quite well. I think just having all of those things stacked against Evan, like not having the matchup, playing a better player, um, I just think that maybe putting him down to 10 is a little harsh. I don't think he played poorly. I think he played to his outs in the game,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and definitely got lucky in the late game from Styx,
Mm-hmm.
kind of throwing away a couple of differential points because he felt threatened by the T-Wave Thunderous,
Mm-hmm.
which didn't have the best matchup given Coco plus Swampert plus Nidoqueen plus Alolan Raichu. Um, like Styx does have those options to neutralize the uh, hazards, status is the word I'm looking for, uh,
Yeah,
from
yeah.
from Evan. So it was definitely hard to play for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and I expect to see Evan bounce back. He did really well last season, making it all the way to the finals. So you know, like I don't expect him to stay down at 10 for all that long. But for now, I've got him down there because yeah, in the end, whilst he was up against a very good team, it was a pretty conclusive loss that became a little bit closer due to Sticks playing very carefully in the end game. So we'll see. I do expect him to bounce back. Let's move on to our next team. So now we're out of all those teams that were kind of tied in terms of their overall ranking, and we're on to Will and the San Antonio Sparse. So we've talked about Will a little bit already. Obviously, he was a bit unlucky in terms of getting frozen on the Confe, which was unfortunate. It wasn't the first bit of hacks in the game. There was already like Suicune burnt the Mega Medicham as it was setting up. I think it was Suicune burnt the Mega Medicham, which obviously was a massive pain for Will. But then he hacked right back with when Lardy came in and missed a Draco. So I don't really know how to feel about those two things because he was able to get rid of that Lardy for free when he absolutely should not have been able to get rid of it. So that was kind of a bit of hacks both ways. I do think that potentially there was, and I kind of flagged this a little bit before when I was talking about the Suicune set that his opponent ran, that the fact that he had so much setup trying to power through the Suicune was kind of reflective of the weaknesses he does have in terms of his grass and electric types, being Decidueye and Stunfisk. Obviously, Decidueye is not as bad in that respect, can run setup, but something like Stunfisk obviously is never going to break a Suicune. I don't think even the most offensive Stunfisk is going to be able to do more than 50% to a Suicune, which is hilarious. And yeah, that did mean that he kind of only really had one strategy against Suicune, and that was to kind of set up and break past it, which obviously, had the Suicune had any kind of phasing, would have made this a lot harder. And I don't think Will would have been able to win this game if the Suicune had been raw. Obviously, he didn't win it in the end anyway because of some hacks, but I do think there were some limitations in prep that weren't taken advantage of, but very easily could have been. The other issue I had with this team is that I feel like he didn't have defensive answers to some of the big offensive threats that his opponent had. So things like um, the Kartana and the Conkelder. And I feel like a Choppleberry Heatran would have been really, really solid here because it takes a hit from Kartana, it takes a hit from Conkelder, it takes a hit from Staraptor, it takes a hit from Togekiss if it's like an Aura Sphere Air Slash set, and it takes a hit from Passimian if it's a like close combat. So I just feel like there were a lot of potential times when having a Choppleberry Heatran to set rocks and put a lot of offensive pressure on because I don't feel like his opponent had the best switch-ins to fire types. Aside from I guess the Suicune, I guess that's maybe why he didn't bring it. But like obviously you can just toxic that thing and then switch around and deal with it in some other way. I don't know. I just felt like Choppleberry Heatran seemed pretty good against a lot of what his opponent had. So that was something that I was just like kind of looking at in prep. I was like, oh, how could you have dealt with these things? Well, yeah, there was a way. But that said, yeah, I thought overall, like in terms of the people who lost this week, I think it's pretty reflective of Will's placement here. That yeah, he was probably the most impressive loser in that he was felt pretty unlucky and overall prepped and played reasonably well. But I do think maybe yeah, trying to power through the Suicune with mono setup may have been his only option, but that's somewhat reflective of a not amazing squad and yeah, may come back to bite him in future. Yeah, do you want to talk about Will?
Yeah, like I think Suicune, like looking at his team closer, it was definitely a problem. He could have run Decidueye with like a Spirit Shackle Toxic set, but that kind of opens him up to like a Rest Tox set from Suicune, which I guess the other two moves on the set could be Swords Dance plus Leaf Blade to try and whittle that down. But then that kind of leaves him vulnerable to kind of the Kartana or the Staraptor or the Togekiss even, because it doesn't give him any options to really break those Pokemon at +2. Even the Muck can switch into those moves as well, and then click Knock Off or Poison Jab or whatever move that Muck felt like going for.
Yeah, that was definitely a big issue for the Decidueye in this matchup is that Muck just walls it. And so, when your grass type is walled and your electric type isn't actually going to put that much offensive pressure on a Suicune, yeah, it was a little bit limited in terms of the ways he had to deal with that.
Yeah, like it's definitely interesting that he doesn't really have much to deal with bulky waters at all. Definitely not being able to break with a Pokemon like Raikou against a bulky water, or something like Zeraora or Tapu Koko. Like those are Pokemon that definitely can break through water types with ease. Like having weaker Pokemon like Decidueye and Stunfisk not being able to break that, I think it definitely limits the team and what it can do.
Yeah, and particularly because they're both so slow as well, so they can't even come in against a weakened Suicune and like outspeed it and kill it. And they're both weak to Ice Beam, so like any water type that is faster than base 70 and can carry Ice Beam, which is pretty much any water type in the game, this team's going to really struggle to break them and or to deal with them offensively. Like Z Manaphy just wrecks this team so badly. And it's very reliant on things like the Comfey to just deal with that with priority Draining Kiss, but obviously that's not that strong, and something like a Manaphy is going to shrug that off and then just blow you back with +3 Surf or like Rain Boosted Surf or whatever. So yeah, I think that's going to be a problem for Will moving forward.
Right, like, and he doesn't even have like a Steel type Pokemon to really take advantage of that. Like he could bring Steel Savali, which can probably eat the water type moves or the ice type moves. But having like Heatran takes a lot from a water type move.
Yeah,
so
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of weaknesses on this team looking at it, but like he does have a strong core with Lando Eye and Mega Metacham, which can just break like crazy. Like those two Pokemon are great to break, both one on physical and one on special. And even Scolipede too, like you Swords Dance Speed Boost with a Z move. it's game over sometimes for teams if they can't live a Z move and then roar it out.
Yeah, yeah. I think that might have been actually the other potential option would have been bringing more of a hazard focused Scolipede rather than a setup Z move Scolipede. Obviously, it did do some breaking in the game, but I think if Suicune is the real problem, and I think Suicune is the obvious problem in the matchup looking at this team, maybe focusing in on that, making sure that if it is rest, it has to click rest by making sure you've got a layer of T spikes up. Um, like having some way of just making sure you can deal with that thing um, would have been, or making sure that thing isn't going to like just wall your whole team forever. Might have been the way to go. Anyway, so
I
that's
mean,
probably
I,
enough.
I did,
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you wanted to have one more comment?
look, I definitely I think I disagree with bringing a hazard
Mm.
stacking Scolipede,
Mm-hmm.
just because the opponent has Megalodios, which doesn't really take anything from spikes or toxic spikes due to
Mm-hmm.
levitate,
Mm-hmm.
and then can easily defog. Like even Kartana, it doesn't get poisoned,
Mm.
can easily defog. Togekiss doesn't get poisoned or take spike damage. It can easily defog.
I mean, I
Even
guess, yeah.
like
Like,
Dawn Fan too.
mm. I mean, Donphan will take the T spikes, and then the rest of those, aside from Kartana, I guess default Kartana may have been something he was considering, but like obviously Lati and Togekiss are dealt with by Scolopede's dual stab. So if you were dual stab plus T spikes Scolipede, you deal with the Mega Lati, you deal with the Togekiss, so you really pressure him away from being able to remove hazards. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like T Spike Scolipede could have been good here, but we'll never know unless these two teams match up again someday. Anyway, let's move on from the San Antonio Sparse to our next team, which is the Arizona Dactyls, coached by Volume. So I had these guys at number 3. You had them at number 10, which I feel is very harsh. I know that we've talked a bit about Volume and already, and how he did try and throw the game away on the last turn in the pursuit of differential. But in the end, it worked for him, and he got most of the predictions in this game right. So whilst, there was some questionable decisions, and there was some stuff that was a little bit hacksy, I did feel overall he prepped this game really well. He had a bunch of win conditions against my team, and I still think this squad is just incredibly strong, and I couldn't really justify putting it any lower than 3. It did go down 1 for me, just because of the couple of teams I had ahead of it. I think both performed really strongly and were a bit more overall convincing. But I don't know. I don't know about putting this guy at 10. But how about you? Talk a bit through about how you felt about Volume.
I think he just got incredibly lucky. Not like Clefable should have went down in the early game, which limits his switch-ins to some of your other Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly, like it doesn't give him a Zygarde switch-in for like an Outrage. You had, I think Mega Diancie was still around, so
Mm-hmm.
Clefable could have walled that
Mm-hmm.
pretty easily. So I think just having the ability to dodge the Seed Flare early after getting the minus, I think the 50% reduction in defense
Mm-hmm.
was definitely a giant plus for Volume
Mm-hmm.
to give him answers for the later game. He did prep well. I'll give him that. It was maybe a little setup reliant. Sand plus Excadrill and then D-Dance for Alligator. I forget what else he brought in that match.
So
He
it
had the
was
Amoonguss and the
Amoonguss.
Latios.
Yeah, and the Latias. Yep. Yeah, Sandcore for Alligator, Clef, Amoonguss, Latias.
So, like, I think you definitely played a little poorly around the Amoonguss.
Mm.
And I think he got a little lucky with the Spore predictions. On the Arcanine was one of them,
Yeah, that
which
was
would have decimated the Arcanine and kind of giving you a little bit of an advantage, I think.
Yeah, no, I should have never ever switched out of Diancie on Amoonguss. That was never the play. Um, and yeah, that's just a misplay on my part. But in the end, a good prediction on his part because he had spored the previous turn and then he spored again as I switched. And yeah, got to pay that. Like that's the thing is, I think he made some risky plays, but most of them paid off, and so I can't really fault him too much for that.
Yeah, like I think he played well. I think I'm kind of basing it off on how he played in the late game. Like he
Mm-hmm.
sacked off. Let me watch near the end of the replay here.
Mm,
He did sack off his Excadrill. He tried setting up with that later in the game.
mm.
Um, he tried setting up with the Feraligatr on the Seed Flare miss, which definitely bit you quite harsh. Like I think you definitely, I think maybe misplayed a little bit because you
Mm.
clicked Seed Flare and then he dodged and then he clicked and then you clicked Psychic and he danced on the Psychic.
Yeah, I think.
And then you just brought in Zygarde and clicked Extreme Speed, which would have killed it. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think he definitely misplayed near the end of the game. That would have cost him more differential
Hmm.
if you hadn't had missed as many moves as you did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then even having Zygarde uh, at 100%, like you could have set up a DD late game and ended up coming back if he just set it up completely wrong, I think,
Mm.
in the end, in the spite of differential.
Yeah, yeah, that's reasonable. I mean, I'm not going to complain too much about you saying, yeah, no, I don't think your opponent actually played that well, and I think, you actually had a chance there. So, but I still think overall this squad's really strong, and like if Volume can sort of even out his play a bit and make it kind of balance out those really good predictions with the maybe like less good, overly risky plays, then I think he'll do really well this year. This season.
I mean, it is
Um,
a Gen 6 team, like with Excadrill, Tyranitar, Megachar, Y. Like, I definitely like the different weathers. It's kind of fun.
yeah, definitely. All right, so let's move on to our next team. So this is the Jump City Hitmonlees, coached by Carson. You had these guys at number 3. We both put them up a bit. I had them at number 9, which was +5 for me, and you had them at number 3. And yeah, Carson got a close win. This is the Mega Venusaur matchup that we were talking about earlier. I thought that, yeah, obviously Mega Venusaur was great and it won the matchup. But I do think he was overall a little bit lucky that his opponent just didn't bring anything to deal with it. Because I thought the rest of his team was a bit underwhelming. Like, I thought both the Smeargle and the Hooper Unbound looked really bad in this matchup, and he switched the Hooper in on what was the most obvious U-turn I've ever seen from Mandibuzz and just like threw it away. The Smeargle pretty much got thrown away in the early game against a really obvious like Mandibuzz just walls Smeargle because it has Overcoat, so it I believe doesn't take the Spore because it's immune to those moves. And so I didn't really see the value of those two in the matchup. And then, yeah, like obviously in the end, Mega Venusaur carried the rest of the team on its back, but I don't think you're going to be able to do that every week. I don't think it's every week that your opponent's just not going to bring an offensive psychic type that destroys that mon. So yeah, whilst I did think he played with the Mega Venusaur really well, he kept it alive. He made sure to never risk it at pretty much any point in the game. That was good. The rest of it, I was a bit less convinced by. What did you think?
I think I definitely put Carson way too high. I don't think he should have moved up 11 spots. Looking at it again, watching the match a second time. Definitely the Gothitelle was a good bring. I think he walled the Celesteela with it, if I'm not mistaken, or the Hariyama, allowing Kieran Black to have the opportunity to sweep through the team if those threats were gone, those defensive switch-ins. He definitely threw away Hoopa U to the Mandibuzz U-turn. I do agree with that. And I think Smeargle's main job was just to get up Hazard. So I don't think he was a smart game plan to do that versus a team with Mandibuzz, because Mandibuzz is probably one of the better defoggers in League format, just due to its bulk. But yeah, definitely having Mega B with Mandibuzz, that's definitely a good Pokemon to defog with, especially when Mega B relies on momentum.
I do just think
going back to Carson, I think he just played decently overall to give him the position to win the game late game with Mega Venusaur after seeing some of the opponent's move sets.
Yeah.
But I don't think I should have marked him at 3. I probably should have marked him closer to where you had him at 9.
Yeah, and I think maybe I'm being a little bit harsh on him, having him at 9, even, to be honest. So I think maybe somewhere between our rankings, and he's probably ended up in about the right spot, which I think, I'm not sure if we're at like 5th or something right now. But yeah. Yeah, so, I think he's probably in about the right spot where he is. He did get the win. It was pretty impressive play with Mega Venu. I think the rest of it was a little bit underwhelming, but, picked up a win. We'll see how he can go moving forward. This team obviously does have some good threats. I think, he also did well, as you said, with the Gothitelle, and he did do pretty well with the Kieran Black as well, to try and break down the things that Mega Venusaur couldn't get rid of quickly. Because it could have very easily turned into a very stally matchup, because Mega Venusaur didn't necessarily put the best amount of offensive pressure on a lot of those mons, but Kieran Black was able to get rid of those things. Kieran Black and Gothitelle were able to get rid of those things. So, yeah, overall, pretty good effort. We'll see how he goes in future weeks. So, it's moving on to the Dayton Dittos, coached by Henry. I had these guys at number 4. You had him at number 7. And yeah, he was able to pick up a pretty lucky win, getting the static with the Zapdos. But then I did think that bringing the Crawdon was really cool. And I thought that, hang on. I can't find his team. Give me a sec. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so I thought that Henry did really well to set up the Crawdont. He positioned it really well in the late game. He'd gotten the damage off he needed on Hydreigon, and pretty much as soon as it Dragon Danced, it was going to... as soon as it Swords Danced, it was going to be able to win the game with Jet. I do think that... because he had Splash Plate as his item, because I did go and confirm the sets just to see, because if it had been a fully defensive Vaporeon, that would have been a roll with Knockoff. It wasn't, but I also confirmed that his item was Splash Plate, which I found interesting. I think the obvious setup targets on his opponent's team were Vaporeon, Gligar, or Talonflame. 2 of those are going to try and burn you, and one of them is probably going to try and Toxic you, because obviously EQ from Gligar is doing nothing to a Crawdon, because it's actually got decent physical bulk. And so, given that, I feel like the Lumberry was really obvious there, and probably should have been the item, because as it stands, he did risk the 30% Scald Burn with the Crawdon. He got away with it. And, I guess he could have just gone for another SD afterwards, but, between the 2 Scalds and the burn damage racking up that he would have had to take, that would have really limited his ability to finish off the game. And so, yeah, I don't know about the Splash Plate. There was probably a calc there where it was getting rid of something that it otherwise couldn't get rid of. But I just feel like, given how it was always going to be a very late game sweeper, that the Lumberry would have been a lot better in the matchup. But that said, that's a pretty small piece of criticism. I felt like overall he played quite well, and took full advantage of the luck that he did get with the Mega Gallade power.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I definitely think that bringing Swords Dance Crawdaunt was definitely a good choice. Definitely was a little risky with the burn damage, but I think looking at the calc after the game, I think a knockoff to a max Vaporeon was doing 94% min. So I think it was definitely a high chance to kill the Vaporeon regardless. I think it was like a 62.5% chance to kill. So I don't think that taking the Scald was the best option, but it definitely gave Henry the ability to sweep at the late game there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was probably one other thing I felt a little bit, which was that this squad doesn't have a huge amount of like options. In terms of like Zapdos doesn't really set up or do anything, Kyurem doesn't really set up, Nidoking doesn't really set up, and that was exposed a little bit. Like um, the the fact that he switched the Bulu into the Hydreigon, and it was just such an obvious switch in, and his opponent was able to take advantage with the Z Fire Blast, and that one cost him. He was able to recover from it, but it did cost him in the early game. Then there was the Raikou versus Zapdos play that I've already talked about a bit earlier, where they were just kind of like throwing attacks at each other and not really, neither of them were really doing anything. If that Raikou had been set up, or if that Raikou had been toxic, then this is a completely different ballgame, because if the Zapdos goes down, there's nothing there to stop the Mega Glade Sweep later on, and at that point, it's game over for Henry. So yeah, I thought that there were some things that were exposed on the squad, but overall did do really well to finish off the game pretty ruthlessly and pick up a 3-0. Are you still there?
To
Oh,
number 3,
hang on. Sorry. Jmac.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just give me a sec, because you cut out there and I only heard like the second half of what you just said. So what I'll do is, okay, so if you want to start that again and then like moving on to the next blah blah blah, and then I'll just cut this little section.
Okay. Moving on to number 3, we have Tone, coach of the Miami Malamarlins. I had him ranked at number 4, and Bacon had him ranked at number 5. What are your thoughts on this, Bacon?
Yeah, so I thought Tone played quite well. He never seemed particularly flustered in the matchup. He used Lele's terrain really well against the Mega Scizor. I think the combination of Lele and Gengar with your opponents not being able to click priority moves is really clever, and is going to be a really tough combo to defeat moving forward. Set up for Hawlucha pretty well, although, as I've already said, a fat Necrozma was a potential issue against this team. I do feel like this team still looked a little vulnerable to opposing setup, or like being reverse swept. Like the Layla Lucha is so obvious that I can see someone at some point bringing an opposing Psychic Seed Mon that maybe beats the Hawlucha. Or opposing terrain mons, and obviously we saw that this week with the Hitmonlee. Hitmonlee wasn't able to do it just because of the presence of Gliscor, which I think is an incredibly important mon for this team. I think it's the real glue. But overall, couldn't really critique much about what Tone did this week. Played it really well. I still think the team has a couple of defensive holes that may be exposed against other teams, but I can't really fault the results, and certainly he showed the potency of the offense, and that's why I've got him up in the top 5, even though I had him 15th initially, probably being overly harsh on that team. I think now it's probably up where it should be.
Yeah, definitely. I think we definitely have him maybe a little. His team is definitely strong physically. or offensively.
Mm-hmm.
So having Tapu Lele is definitely a giant threat for teams that don't really have much to switch into it. From looking at Muse the Best's roster, he only had maybe the Persian as a psychic switch in, but nothing from like a like from a fairy perspective. Definitely, the offensive typing is there that could easily sweep through uh, Muse the Best team. So
Mm-hmm.
it was definitely hard to prep for, and I think it was kind of funny to see the mind games between having Misty terrain up and having Psychic terrain up with Tapu Fini that Muse the Best brought. It definitely was a hard matchup because Tapu lately also has Psyshock, so it doesn't really give the option for uh, Tapu Fini to really have longevity in the match. Whether it takes the special hit or a physical hit from the Psyshock, it limits its ability to uh, match up against the Lele in the game. And definitely being able to set up with Hawlucha late just to give them that sweep was definitely smart planning from Tone. I think overall he just played really quite well.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a pretty reasonable summary. Not that much to say. All right, so moving on to our number two, and this was a unanimous number two, in the form of the Duke Blue Dwebbles, coached by Styx. Uh, yeah, Styx played quite well, particularly in the early game. I feel like he, took calculated risks, but he had the Sugarberry on the Tapu Koko, so he was able to play with that fairly loosely in the early game because he knew he had an out. Um, and Nidoqueen was a really good bring because it checked both potential opposing defoggers, so it was always a pretty reliable stealth rocker in the matchup. And yeah, always had like good outs with things like a Greninja, things like having the Cofagrigus take on the Mega Kang. Yeah, it was just overall it was like good prep, good play. Obviously fiddled around a bit in the end game when he didn't actually have to, but he did it for a good reason at least. He did it for the reason of guaranteeing the win. Rather, like it was kind of the opposite almost of Volume's game against me, where Volume fiddled around to try and get differential and risked losing the game. Styx fiddled around to guarantee the win and risked some differential and lost that differential, but in the end made sure that he got the win. So yeah, that's probably why I've got him at the high spot.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely fine to have him at number two. I was wanting him to maybe be at number four just because he didn't conserve the differential in the late game,
Mm-hmm.
but just with this team in general, like he has a very strong matchup against a lot of teams.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, like Coco has the speed with Mega Aerodactyl that kind of limits Scarfers to come, and he also has like bulk in Jirachi and Buzzwole, Swampert, Incineroar, Kofag, Nidoqueen. Like his team overall, it definitely has longevity. I think it's maybe
Mm-hmm.
a little higher than the 5 that you gave it in the original power ranking,
Mm-hmm.
and it definitely has momentum. So like I don't think many teams will be able to check Sticks throughout the season because I
Mm-hmm.
think the team just offers so many options to
Yeah.
win matchups.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I had it at number four initially, not number five. But yeah, I definitely agree. I think he's proven, and he talked about this a bit. I did watch his draft analysis video, and he was saying that he felt a little bit uncomfortable with the team. He was sort of like, I'm not 100% sure that it all will go together. And that was kind of the only reason, the only sort of reticence I had about it as well when I was doing week zero power rankings, where I just felt, I'm not sure this will all go together. But it did come together for week one. I think it will in future. And the fact that he was up against Evan, who, like you ranked quite highly, I maybe underranked a little bit, but like, thought his draft was quite strong. And I thought his play was totally fine this week. So, yeah, I think the fact that he's at number 2 is probably reflective of the quality of opposition and the fact that his team is incredibly strong, as much as it is a reflection of the fact that he, played pretty well and picked up the solid W. So yeah, I think like definitely deserves to be top 3. I think probably deserves to be top 2. I think his win and the win that we're about to talk about were the 2 most impressive wins that we saw in week 1. There was a little bit of hacks, I think, in pretty much every other game, whereas I don't think there was much hacks in this game, and there wasn't much hacks in the next game that we're going to talk about. So that said, let's move on to our number 1. And I don't think it's going to be a surprise to many people that it is Owen and the Leinster Larias. And you were very enthusiastic earlier to talk about Owen's win over Scoot, so why don't you start us off?
So, yeah, like I think Scoot definitely misplayed early on, and Ian definitely took advantage of that quite well. The prep was there with Crobat and Mega Mawile, and some of the threats in general with with like Snorlax. The big surprise here was Venomoth. Not a lot of people see Venomoth do well in draft format. I've seen maybe a couple of videos from MV where he will bring Venomoth on the OU ladder and do a couple of fun things with it. So definitely seeing Venomoth. I think how many kills did it get? Did it get 4 kills in the game?
Yeah, it was 4 or 5. It was most of the kills.
It was just insane to watch. Like he played so well with it, like clicking sleep powder when there was something that was bulky that he couldn't kill right away, or and then setting up an extra quiver dance so he gets the damage to 2-hit KO after that point and reduce damage from Pokemon like the Sylveon was definitely interesting. I think even with the Z move, I don't know, it's definitely a match that needs to be watched. I'm not sure if we can maybe link that battle in the description of the video, but it's definitely something to watch because it's definitely enjoyable to see how Ian played and how well he showcased Venomoth.
Yeah, definitely. What we might do is we could put a link into Scoot and Owen's YouTube videos where they commentate on the battle. So then you can see it from both sides because this was probably like in terms of entertainment value with the Bellydrum Zardex and the Venomoth, it was probably match of the week in that respect, if not the closest game. I think Owen. I think you're right. I think Owen played really well. He set up. Like, he relentlessly kind of put himself in a position to set up with Mega Mawile, to set up with Venomoth, and to really put offensive pressure onto Scoot's team. I think probably the only piece of criticism I had, and this is a criticism of the team more than it is of the play, is that he set up Rocks turn 1 with the Mega Mawile when his opponent had a Landorus T, which is obviously like a great response to Mega Mawile and also a great defogger. So I think that was a little bit questionable, but I think that was more a reflection of the fact that if you're not bringing, Pileswine isn't going to be great in every matchup, Komodo is going to want to be offensive in a lot of matchups, so you may have to do that thing where you bring Rock's Mega Mawile a lot of weeks, and given how potent of an offensive threat it was in the matchup overall, being forced to send it out turn 1 to click Rocks seemed a little bit unideal. That said, he was able to take full advantage of the fact that he had the Wish Passer with Aloma Mola, which, having seen Owen use Aloma Mola in MLBA, where he took it to a championship, and I don't know, I think he dropped maybe 1 game all season. It's going to be really, really tough for opponents to break that, and it's so good for bringing back things like the Pileswine, for bringing back things like the Mega Mawile, even the Victini, or even the Zorora. So, this team is super threatening, and is going to be very tough to deal with moving forward into the season. So I think, pretty undisputed number 1, as you can see by the fact that we both have him there. Anything else you wanted to say about Owen?
No, I think we've pretty much wrapped it up. Definitely has a strong team, and given the fact that he didn't even have to bring Zero Aura this week, speaks volume to the power of the team overall. As
Hmm.
Zero Aura is definitely a bona fide threat for many in the draft format.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it was good to see him utilize really early on the Venomoth, which you've already spoken about, and also having a more offensive Crobat, because a lot of people will just run a very defensive Crobat pretty much every week. It was good to see Owen like immediately be able to click powerful Brave Birds, and it just is going to force a lot of prep moving forward into the season, knowing that he's completely willing to bring those slightly less common offensive threats. Um, on his roster, and you're going to have to prep for all the mons, not just the really obvious threats like Zorora, Komodo, Mega Mawile. So yeah, gonna be tough, and we'll see how. I don't know if I have to play him during this season because he's not in my conference. So hopefully I don't, because I'm not looking forward to going up against this team. Um, at the very least, I'd love it to be in playoffs.
For sure. Yeah, no, like his team's definitely threatening, so I don't think many people would want to face it. Um, Maybe Sticks, because he's always up for a challenge. So
yeah, and definitely the challenge of it will be a lot of fun. But yeah, we'll see how it goes, and we'll see if anyone can knock Owen off top spot on the power rankings moving forward. So with that, that's about all we have for you today. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please leave a like, drop a comment, etc. And yeah, I think that's about all. So this is Bacon and Jmac signing off.
thanks for watching.